Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, aka He Who Spoils, and it's time to get into our Kangsters paradise with Loki Season 2. Things are heating up in a Jonathan Majors way, and we're finally starting to learn more about the Big Bad's backstory. Throughout this video, we're going to be breaking down Season 2 Episode 3 and discussing all the Easter eggs, hidden details, and things you missed. Heavy spoilers ahead, and if you enjoy the video, please hit the thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for breakdowns like this every day. With out of the way, huge thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into the latest episode of Loki.
Time is everything.
Now, as always, we begin with the Marvel Studios logo. However, you've probably noticed there's a major difference to the music here. Played out on an old-timely piano, this instantly puts us in the mood for where we're going to be heading. That is Chicago in the year 1868 on the sacred timeline. Here we join Ravonna Renslayer, who, from her perspective, has just stepped through the doorway at the end of Season 1. Now this is a big changer from how Kang was in the comics, with the Victor Timely persona even being changed slightly too. In those, Nathaniel Richards was born during the 31st century, and he basically lived in a peaceful utopia. Finding it more boring than a heavy spoilers video, he decided to travel back in time and conquer Earth using the technology from his civilization. Now, during one of his many defeats, Kang ended up going back in time to the 1st of January 1901. Founding the town of Timely, Wisconsin, he then became the mayor and built a corporate empire up around himself. Creating Timely Industries, this allowed him to integrate into all forms of technology, including the automotive field. However, he also started dabbling in robotics and even built life model decoys that would carry out tasks while he was away. These aged as well, and Timely was able to come back and pretend to be Victor's son so he could continue operating. Now, if you're a fan of the old school comics, then you'll probably know that the original Human Torch was an android, and Timely was retconned into having a hand in making this. He also provided security down the line for Avengers Tower, which could be what the Kang building and the Void had links to. Anyway, what we get here is a vast departure, with Timely being a child of the 1800s. I know that this is definitely played across like one of his many origin stories, but technically this is the sacred timeline, so it's where either He Who Remains is from or one of his main variants. Potentially He Who Remains may have even killed Victor and then taken over his timeline while cutting down the others. We've never heard any version of Kang confirm if their name's Nathaniel yet, and potentially when we do, that will be the true version of Kang. Now, if this isn't He Who Remains, then why would he choose to live in a timeline that he doesn't belong to? Well, it's something that we saw Cap do with Peggy, if you follow how the Russos interpret Endgame, and this may have been a timeline where the best decisions were made. Man could have ended up in the Morbius universe, but instead he's out here looking after Mobius. Now, what we see playing out is the literal definition of the bootstrap paradox, with it showing us the theory behind it in live action. When talking about time travel, you often get lots of different situations where you could go over how certain things would work if they were actually real. For example, the most famous one's the grandfather paradox, in which you'd be unable to go back in time and kill your granddad because if you did, then you'd never be born. Therefore, you couldn't go back in time and kill him, hence why it's classed as being a paradox. Now, when it comes to the bootstrap paradox, that lays out the groundwork by imagining a scientist who one day gets a knock at the door. Upon opening it up, he finds a book there which clearly lines out how to build a time machine. The scientist then uses this and travels back in time, knocks on his own door, and then leaves himself the book. Also, huge shout outs to the channel Smart by Design. I've used this animation on countless breakdowns when I was talking about Dark and stuff, and I've never given them a shout out because I'm a piece of shit. So apologies for that, but yeah, this always comes in useful. Now, there are theories that the book would decay and fall apart over time, as that's the thing that's remaining consistent. I've never really found out why it's classed as a paradox though, and I thought that it might be down to that. However, it could also be a chicken and egg situation where it can't happen first if we view time in a linear fashion. In order for it to operate, time has to be cyclical and exist all at once as part of a big block. Now, what we're witnessing with He Who Remains is him very much creating his own origins in his death. At the end of time, once Loki and Sylvie arrive, he then sends Ravonna back to give himself the TVA manual. This then allows him to walk the path where he'd become He Who Remains, who then tells Ravonna to go and give himself the book. It's a bit of a head fuck, but it's the bootstrap paradox playing out over thousands of years and creating a sort of Ouroboros cycle playing into the themes of the season. Kang's new origins somewhat based on this as well, with it being updated in Only Myself Left to Conquer. That saw young Nathaniel going back in time and then bumping into his older self, who then started to train him. Killing Nathaniel's first love, this pitted the two in a war across time in which Nathaniel battled versions of Kang throughout most of history. Now in the end, he became a bitter old man that journeyed back to the spot where he first met Kang. Here he encountered a younger version of himself, and we watched as the cycle then played out again. You also have this sort of being based around the lesser known time travel novel by H.G. Wells, which was called The Chronic Argonaut. Released in 1888, this short story sees a time traveler creating a loop like what we get here. I'll talk about this all more in just a bit, but now just a quick word from our sponsors. Now this video is sponsored by Dungeon Hunter 6. This is the latest addition to the Dungeon Hunter franchise after a long line of releases since the game took the world by storm in 2009. The brand new, highly anticipated addition to the series is now here, and I have to say it was definitely worth the wait. Dungeon Hunter 6 is a free-to-play ARPG with a unique hero collector feature and stunning fantasy style. The gameplay features a fast-paced hack-and-slash combat style with various builds and skills to utilize as you fight big bosses. The game is absolutely free to play, and all you have to do to get it is go to the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. Now what makes Dungeon Hunter 6 different is that killing bosses isn't the end. Every time you defeat one, the game comes in with its unique mechanism that lets you loot, ride, fly them, and also summon up to 3 of them to become members of your squad. You can get them to follow you everywhere, perform combo skills, and even shapeshift into them as you get further into the game in order to harness their powers. There's over 100 bosses that are updated monthly, so you never run out of fun things to do with them. Dungeon Hunter 6 also comes with optimized graphics for smoother mobile gameplay. The 3D graphics take performance to the next level and give you the best visual experience in combat and mobile devices. On top of this, you can play with your guild mates and battle in real-time guild wars. Play through a variety of skill tree options and trade items via the auction system. Download the game for free now on both iOS and Android devices. Use my link in the description below or scan the QR code right now if you're viewing on PC. For that, you'll also get a special starter pack worth $50 by just using my link. That comes with 10 summoning scrolls, 1 SSR Lieutenant, the Demonic Wolf, and also an accessory pack. Use your game account to enter the launch Lucky Spin event for free to win great prizes like an iPhone 15 Pro Max, PS5, Apple Watch, and more starting October 13th. Check out the description for more details, download the game there, or scan the QR code on screen right now if you're viewing on PC. Thanks. Now Miss Minutes ends up blending in by transforming herself into a sort of Steamboat Willie style clock, which Disney of course built themselves up from. Might also be a nod to Fleischer Studios, which were the thing at the time, and that giant ghost clock definitely feels in line with it. We then see the book being left, which Victor opens up, and we can see that it's written by Ouroboros. Technically, he's the guy who should be in charge, as he's the one that came up with everything. Instead, he's just been shuffled off to the basement where he's been given a thankless role that involves fixing everything. However, he's so important to Kang that he couldn't even afford to wipe his memory, as doing this would lose all of his valuable knowledge. Thus he's been put down there to not interfere with others, but I feel like the season might be about him coming out on top. Anyway, from here we jump to the temporal loom, where Obi says,
"Without he who remains temporal owner, I don't know."
How much time do we have?
This shows that they need him to be the one who manages what's happening, and they have to bring him directly to the TVA. Now all of the pruned branches have started to grow back, which is overloading the loom and causing all these issues. This means that even the timelines that were destroyed are sprouting back up from the moment of their inception, which could possibly cause more returning characters. In the end, this overload could destroy the TVA and truly unleash an infinite strand of multiverses. So far when we've seen the timeline, there's only been a handful of them springing off, but this would lead to a countless number being created. This would destroy the TVA, and its creation clearly reined in the branches and kept them under control. Now shoutouts to our editor Matt for pointing out this is a similar control room to Chernobyl, which itself dealt with a reactor overloading. You can also catch a clock up on the wall, which has several hands showing that time doesn't really exist yet. He says,
"And we're all gonna die!"
Which calls back to this line from last week.
We're all gonna die! Oh, hey, nice to meet you. We're all gonna die!
Missed it in our last breakdown as well, but this was also uttered by X5.
If we stay here, we're all gonna die.
I'd find it hilarious if this was doing some foreshadowing and we ended the entire series with everyone dead in this timeline. Anyway, we see Mobius and Loki heading out, which is when they arrive in Chicago. When they step out, we see the number 157, and last week we had the number 158 on the license plate at the premiere. These numbers, they might seem arbitrary, but they could also be hinting to something else going on. The Living Tribunal appeared in Strange Tales 157 and 158, with his arc being the character's debut. He's slowly been dotted throughout the MCU, with his head first appearing in Loki Season 1. It then popped up in Multiverse of Madness and Love and Thunder, which may show we're inching towards him coming in. Now from here they travel to 1893, which is an extremely important event. This is the World Columbian Exposition to celebrate 400 years since Christopher Columbus's arrival. The fair actually had the assassination of the mayor happen at it, which could be hinting at what may come for Victor. Now Mobius then mentions H.H. Holmes, Edison, and the White City. Holmes was the serial killer that was active during 1881 to 1894, with lots of his attacks happening around this event. Edison is Thomas Edison, the world-class inventor who came up with lots of incredible discoveries, came up with them on his own. Now Edison somewhat acts as an inspiration for Victor, as he's initially just using the loom to generate power. Boiled down to it, though he can invent stuff, he doesn't really have a clue what he's doing, as he just discovered it instead of creating it himself. Edison was accused of stealing ideas from the patent office, as he apparently worked there, and every time a big idea came in from an inventor, he apparently just ran off and took it. I kind of feel like Ouroboros might be scorned by what's happening with Victor as well, and this could be a sort of revenge plot in order to get Kang. Now when we look through history, there's been countless people that steal the ideas of others and pass them off as their own. Bob Kane got credited as being the sole creator of Batman, when in reality it was mainly Bill Finger's work. There's countless of these examples laced throughout everything, and I feel like the season might kind of be building off the back of that. Now as we said, Mobius calls it the White City, which our editor Matt pointed out was due to there being no classical architecture which led to these white structures. As they walk through the streets, you pay close attention, you can also see a newspaper stand talking about the Liberty Bell. This is further followed up by a lad selling them, who brings it up as well as the main story.
Liberty Bell made its debut on 4th of July. Ghost Clock continues to haunt the Midway.
Now this was commissioned due to the crack in the other one that meant it couldn't be rung. This one was supposed to be used on July the 4th, but the bell actually missed its deadline and got finished up in August. Now they grab a paper, and on it we get some other nods to the time, with the World's Fair Hotel being off to the side. This was actually, it's pretty dark this reference, but this was actually H.H. Holmes' quote-unquote murder castle, which he built to lure in unsuspecting victims. Featuring a maze of hallways, false floors and trapdoors, it allowed the killer to carry out his crimes. Ooh, sound mysterious with a cold. Now there's also a mention of Watkins, which may be a reference to John Alfred Watkins. He was the curator of the Mechanical Technology Museum, and on his wiki it says he visited the fair in Chicago. The main thing they're after though is the ghost clock of Miss Minutes, who we see terrorizing the townfolk later on in the entry. Beside her we can also catch a sketch of Ravonna, because back then cameras weren't as readily available. Now from here we get a little fade out with a black circle closing in, which was the fashion at the time, and then move across to the Chinese Village and Theatre. This was a real life location that I think, and I'm stressing think might have inspired the one on Hollywood Boulevard. Now they grab some popcorn and wander through the rows, which is where they come across a shrine to the gods of Norse mythology. Odin is styled to look exactly like Anthony Hopkins, and Thor's he looks sort of like Chris Hemsworth. It's kind of like the Hello video with Lionel Richie, where it's a big massive head. And to be fair, love, I'll let you off because you're blind, but that doesn't look anything like Lionel Richie, mate. The f*** is this? Now Loki isn't apparent, and instead we get Balder the Brave.
Why'd they include Balder? No one's even heard of him.
Sure they have Balder the Brave.
Now we're going to get into some bragging territory, but you might remember that back when Multiverse of Madness released, we dropped the exclusive story that Daniel Craig had been cast as Balder the Brave in the movie. Unfortunately, due to COVID, he was taken out of the film, with John Krasinski's Reed being dropped in instead. Craig was later asked about it, and he said,
I'm not sure how you're going to do with this next one.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of the character Balder the Brave?
No.
There was a report, Daniel,
Yes.
that you were going to be in Doctor Strange.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Don't you hide behind that mug, Daniel Craig.
I don't know what you're talking about.
In theory, would it be interesting to be in a Marvel movie?
Oh, I'd take any job. I'm good. I'd just like if the hours are good, I'd take any job. I mean, of course, it's like, sure, absolutely, okay. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's good. He's too good for me, damn it.
So yeah, Daniel Craig was pretty much Balder the Brave originally, but as we know, things going on with the world got in the way. Now, I would have to go back and look at when this was shot, but potentially it might have been at the time that Craig was still involved. This could have been a little nod to him, but it works either way, and it shows how shoved out the family that Loki is. Balder the Brave is a big character in the Thor comics, and Loki's been forgotten about, so this character we've not seen in live action, him being pushed to the front, it just adds an extra insult. Now, across the row, they see a sign for Timely's astounding temporal marvels. Astounding is a word that's been used to prefix certain comic runs, and Marvel is, well, you're smart, you can figure out the Easter egg there. On top of this, we also have a nod to the musician Ferdinand Lang. There's lots of German musical acts, which we even catch on stage when we go inside to see Renslayer. German beer is being served too, and we finally get the scene that was used at the end of Quantumania. Now, I have to say, I didn't really like the betrayal Magus was giving off here, as it was him kind of hamming it up, and I was hoping we'd get something more intimidating to explain why Loki looks so scared. Instead, he's just stuttering about, jumping about, and to be honest, it had me a bit like, no. I know people who've seen episode 4, and they said he gets better, and to be fair, he does improve as the episode goes on. His hair is also clearly based on Frederick Douglass, so they have looked at the time to inspire what the character looks like. Now, Magus actually wore something similar at the Oscars, with even the colour being like what he has here. Man's just waffling about though, trying to use time as clean energy, similar to how Pym particles were used in Quantumania. He mentions ropes of voltage, which of course plays off the threads, and he too talks about Edison and how his device is more powerful. Now, he also says he wants to power the entire planet, and we know that the loom was enough to power all the TVA. Magus then busts out a famous quote,
"Because all science is fiction until it's fact!"
And this is also similar to demonstrations that Tesla used to carry out at expositions, with the Prestige being where they played it out in live action. Well, it was live in real life, but you know what I'm saying. Now, Edison's goons ended up trying to downplay Tesla's discoveries, and those sort of goons, they also appear here too. Meeting Ravonna, the pair are star-crossed lovers, with them being destined to never actually be together. In the newly established origin, Kang killed her, and she was then split across time, appearing at multiple points reincarnated throughout history. Every time Nathaniel managed to get close to her, she was either killed or she betrayed him, and this might explain why He Who Remains abandoned her. Now, Victor does say that he prefers to work alone, and this clearly spells out what happened with them.
I don't do partners. Excuse me.
He stayed in the castle at the end of time all by himself, even though he could have ruled with Ravonna. In many ways, it's impossible for people like this to share power, which is something that we saw with Sylvie. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a similar situation in which he cast Ravonna out, much like how Sylvie did with Loki. He could then wipe her memory, and that would lead into the new TVA. Anyway, he's a con man, a snake oil salesman who's great at commanding a crowd, and He Who Remains was of course really good at holding your attention. We see as a little bidding war plays out, and he then gets given $1,000. Now, the second guy who jacked up the price was actually in on the deal, and Victor drops some money on the bar for him. Ravonna sees it all and begins to question it, even showing that she has her doubts over him. As we see, this turns out to be right, as Kang is and will always be a very shady character. Maybe not when he's Iron Lad, you're alright Iron Lad. In Immortus, you've been alright from time to time, but you can be a dick. Anyway, I also think the series kind of talks about indoctrination and how there's people who will still follow Kang even after he's exposed. The old saying is that it's easier to scam someone than convince them they've been scammed, and people will often fight to keep those they idolize in place, even if it's revealed to be a lie. You see it all the time these days with online personalities that get exposed, and people jump to their side even in the face of evidence. I think seeing Victor like this spells out Kang's entire character, with him basically being a trickster just like Loki. However, Loki is showing actual growth, whereas Victor is going to remain the same old con man. He's also similar to Killian in Iron Man 3 because he's a bit of a loser trying to pitch his ideas. Both characters went on to become extremely powerful, and they were spurred on by their failures to become something evil. Now Loki has some tricks up his sleeve too, and we see as he transports a goon outside in the hog's cage that we saw earlier. This idea of something powerful being played off as magic is too akin to the Prestige, with people buying that over what's really going on. Now inside we hear as the machine explodes, and watch as Renslayer and Mobius bump into each other once more. We also see that he's made trousers that apparently make you taller, and leg lengthening stuff that increases your height. That's been a scam that's been run for centuries. I love how we also have the idea of timely meeting them for the first time here when they're much further down the road, which is sort of the reverse to how he later meets them. Now we watch as Victor runs towards an ancient Egypt exhibition, which could be a nod to his variant Rama Tut. Reaching here, but bear with me, and we see as Victor hides behind a pillar, and Kang, he actually hid out during ancient Egyptian times, and he became a pharaoh known as Rama Tut. The Fantastic Four ended up travelling back there, which is when they ran into the villain and then defeated him. An Easter egg for Rama Tut actually popped up during Moon Knight, and it could be spotted on the back of a thug's jacket. I was expecting him to get teased at more in Moon Knight, but alas, he's never got referenced again. However, Sylvie does have an Ankh earring, and I'm wondering if this is a further nod to him, or even something linking in with Moon Knight. Moving on though, the Egyptian temple was actually an exhibition at the World's Fair, which is a really cool way to tie history in with the characters. The pair managed to make it to the Ferris wheel, and we can also see a sash and a woman that's discussing the vote. This movement really picked up between 1890 to 1919, with women finally getting passed in Congress June 4th of that last year. At this point Sylvie arrives, and last week she promised to kill He Who Remains.
He shows up again. His variants, what are you gonna do?
Kill him.
This is brought up again in the episode.
You asked me what I would do if one of his variants turned up, and I told you then I'd kill him!
And she kind of feels like Loki's indoctrinated now, as all he cares about is a TVA. Again, I feel he'd be the perfect person to replace He Who Remains, as he's now starting to see how important they are. Unfortunately, they're what's holding everything in place, and I think that Loki will see that it's better someone's hand is on the wheel if there's someone that you can trust. Now, I think it's kind of a comment on government and how people often become politicians in the hope they can change things. However, they inevitably end up doing the exact same thing that's happened before, because the structures and people who ascend only do so by sticking to the rules. The Sylvie classes He Who Remains as the most dangerous man that's ever lived, and when you look at it, he pretty much is. His variants across the multiverse caused a giant war and also wiped out trillions of lives by destroying timelines. Outside, we also see Ravonna shutting down the idea that she can work with Mobius again, saying there's no we anymore. The pair saw themselves as a team during season 1, but she betrayed him like Sylvie did Loki and then escaped through a doorway. Here Loki's once more protecting He Who Remains, while Sylvie wants to kill him, building off the back of that season 1 finale. Sylvie blasts them back off the wheel, but this isn't as powerful as we saw last week. There we watched as the pair teamed up, explaining why it was way more stronger. Way more stronger. Great grammar in the video. Now Ms. Minute scares everyone off by turning into a giant ghost, which people are already afraid of due to those newspaper reports. At Victor's home we also see some of his inventions, which include a refrigerated chair. Guy's made a lazy boy with a fridge in the bottom, and Matt, our editor Matt, yeah, don't wanna slag the guy off, but he was saying how this shows the guy's got real talent. He made a refrigerated chair, Matt, mate. What are you on about? Now Miss Minute starts getting jealous that they're getting close to each other, and as we see, she's down to become his girlfriend. She starts complimenting him, and Victor calls her pretty singular. She says,
"Why, thank you. You're pretty singular yourself. At least, you will be."
And this is because He Who Remains wipes out all his variants until he's just He Who Remains. Now Ravonna talks about how a version of Victor created the TVA, and Ms. Minute praises him for creating her. She says they ruled together at the end of time, but I kinda wonder how the timeline with her works. She was there at the end with him in season 1, but conscious why she was before this event here. So at some point this version's gonna have to be destroyed, and then Victor will create a new one that follows him through time. Now the conversation's interrupted by the guy from before. I could just look up his name, couldn't I? Oh, right there he is in the credits, and we can see that he's actually called Robber Baron. Looking this up, it was actually a derogatory term for an industrialist during the 19th century. People that got called this were known for exploiting their workers, which this guy seems to be the type to do. Now Victor says that they need to head to his lab in Wisconsin, which is where the character was based at in the comics. Chased outside, Loki runs into the group where he blasts Robber Baron back. Turns out Victor has a little hiding spot, and due to all the cons he's pulled in the past, he'd probably rely on something like this to get out of people's way. We then get a brilliant overhead shot, and this takes us to the SS Heron. I couldn't find a historical entry for this boat, but it may be a reference to Kate Heron, the director of Season 1. Let me know below though, if you know what it is. Did your grandfather work on it? And interesting story actually, and I'm not lying. My granddad was Irish, yeah, and his dad actually worked on the Titanic. My granddad, yeah, one day he was reeling off a story about how his dad worked on the Titanic, and my grandma goes, probably why it sunk. Anyway, we had a laugh, and we cut to see the new trio in the boat. Now this is what Ravonna later gets ditched in, but it's quite a romantic moment. I love how Miss Minutes is kind of a stand-in for the moon, and he shows off his designs like how Kate showed Jack his drawings during the movie Titanic. Hey, speaking of Titanic, never mind. Now these include pruning sticks, and Ravonna admits to giving him the book, and we see the further jealousy within Ms. Minutes flaring up. She says,
I brought it to you.
You brought it to him the way the postman brings the post.
And then we can see her switch sides and sit closer to him. Whereas beforehand she'd been happily smiling away, we now see her frowning because she's taking her man. Now we get a picture of Ouroboros in the back of the book, and I'm gonna do your head in, but we think he's the big bad of the show, and that takes us into the part of the video where we do theories. So Ouroboros is someone that we've been suspecting has an ulterior motive in the series. When it came to the TVA, he pretty much invented everything, and as we know, he was the one who wrote the book on the tech. Rather than being thanked or appreciated though, he was shuffled off to the basement, which you have to ride through 2 elevators just to get to. This was so that he could be kept out of the way because he's the only one that didn't get his memory wiped. This is why he remembered Mobius visiting him and so on, and if he was interacting with the main group, he'd probably end up spilling the beans. Now if we look at the comics, there was a Kang variant called Mr. Griffin who actually had the ability to cause people to time slip. He also said he'd been awake for thousands of years, which is similar to how Obi refuses to sleep. On top of that, Man had a green tie, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was a big plan for him to take over and rule everything. Man's bringing a new meaning to the term disgruntled employee, and we've seen how this has affected other characters in the MCU. Now MT was the one who came up with that theory and evidence, and if you'd like to see a full video breaking it down, then check out the one at the end. Anyway, that's the end of the part of the video where we do theories. Now Victor talks about
This is most important discovery I've made yet. It's a throughput multiplier,
which he came up with himself. This shows that he does have some talent, but he's very much standing on the shoulders of giants. Kinda looks like a miniature version of the time sphere, which too had folding parts and elements that shifted on it. It could also be the core from Quantumania, and I feel like we may learn how it connects to other things. This even may be the way they fix the time loom next week, and this upgrade could be what brings it all together. Even though he's a bum, Ravonna starts to see the man he's going to become, but at the moment she only sees the good. As we know, he's a ruthless conqueror that wants to rule no matter the cost, and she says,
I have high hopes for this partnership.
However, he's never going to view her as an equal, and letting go of her hand, we see Ms. Minutes perk up because she knows Victor's going to dump her. And dump her he does, leaving her stranded in the sea, where she has to row her boat gently down after him. Now at Victor's lab, we see lots of mannequins, which could be building off the back of what he did in the comics. As we mentioned, Timely was trying to make androids, and he'd often use mannequins as a basis for his work. Also, in the arches holding up the doors, we can see circular patterns sitting inside of them. This reminded me a lot of the spirals in the windows at the castle, and I love how this is already integrated into his life. Ms. Minutes then starts to flirt with him, and to be honest, I found this kind of weird. Like, it kind of took me out seeing that she wanted to become a person, and it seems like she's going on a sort of a weird Pinocchio story. We learn that she was a simple AI that played chess, but in the end, Kang gave her autonomy. This gave her free will, and she wrote her own program, which, from the sounds of it, is to become the guy's wife. Also, shoutouts to MT for pointing out that Ms. Minutes might be based off the comic Kang's AI, which went by the name Brideshead. Brideshead actually worked with Renslayer after she took over Kang's time kingdom, so Ms. Minutes wanting to be a Brideshead, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Now, I think her telling him this is another bootstrap paradox in which he'll eventually discover this AI and then make it her. Her big hang-up though is that he didn't give her a real body, but as we've seen, it's probably for the best. Man would have betrayed her, but with her being AI, he's still happy to keep her around as the help. He ends up shutting her down and betraying her too, which is when Ravonna ends up stepping forward. Carrying a prototype time stick, this actually looks slightly similar to the retroactive canon that comes from the comics. This had the same function as the sticks in the show, with it wiping you out of existence. At this point she takes charge, and then Loki and Mobius bust in. She says she put the TVA above herself and won't be lectured about losing her way. Last season she went to find her free will, but she's clearly wanting to become She Who Remains.
I'm the only one who can bring stability to the TVA because that's what I've been doing, thanklessly, for eons.
At this point, Sylvie makes herself known by using the blast, and she stands with a sword over Victor. This is of course in line with how she had He Who Remains last season, but I feel that there's a deeper meaning to this. Victor says he hasn't done anything yet, and it's sort of playing on the old thought experiment of whether he would go back in time and kill Hitler as a baby. We've often talked about with Kang how you never know what you're going to get, and there will be both good and bad versions of him. I think the performance really starts to come together at this point, and Sylvie realizes she's kind of becoming like the TVA. Rather than giving people chances and choices and letting them be their own people, they're simply wiped out. In the end, she spares them and sends them to the TVA, but she still has unfinished business with Renslayer. As we know, she was the one who took her in as a child and caused her to live this constant life of torment. Mobius ends up leaving her behind, and Sylvie shoves her through a door like she did to Loki. She said that she wanted a seat at the end of time and sends her to the castle, which is now falling apart. Absolutely love this reveal, and we see the remains of He Who Remains with him still in the spot where he died. This is actually a callback to the comics in which his corpse was discovered exactly like this. Around the castle we can see several of the time strands breaking off, which started to fracture at the end of season 1. Ravonna has kinda got a wish, and she's been dropped out of the place that she wanted to rule from. However, be careful what you wish for, as it can easily lead to you losing out. Now what this move does is that it scorns the pair and makes them realise that they should take the positions themselves. When you think about it, they've both been running the TVA anyway, so they've probably wondered why they even need He Who Remains at all. I feel like replacing him is the ultimate goal of the season, with it basically being a battle over who should rule the TVA. Now Miss Minutes knows everything Victor will do as she's seen it all, and she's basically become the spoiler clock and is now teasing what will happen next time. Now what I feel is going to go down is that Renslayer is going to learn what happened with her and He Who Remains. The pair were clearly close at some point due to the recording we heard back in episode 1.
For all time.
He very much gave the idea that they'd work together, but as we know, that wasn't the case. I feel like they may show what really happened with them and how he wiped her memory and banished her to the TVA. Technically, this was a younger Renslayer, so she'd learn about what happened in the past to banish her. They might also show how He Who Remains took Ravonna in, as we know that she had a life out there too. Renslayer was taken from this and then drafted into the TVA, and we might see how she had a happy life somewhere out on the timeline. Maybe she had a husband, kids, or something else like a dog, and he took her away from that and then wiped her memory. Obviously, let me know your thoughts below, but I think that's one of the big things that's gonna get revealed. There's also the possibility that Renslayer could be a Kang variant as well, and we have seen with Sylvie and Loki how you can have a version that becomes gender swapped. Perhaps Kang and Renslayer were the original Loki and Sylvie, and this might be why he cast her out, because we can see the problems that would be caused. This would be a big way to tie things in with the season, and her wanting to be the leader also makes sense from an ambition point of view.
It's gonna make you real angry.
Now as for my thoughts in this episode, I think it was another great little entry that gave me some surprises. I was expecting Timely to be a time traveller from the future due to the Quantumania post-credit scene, but they gave me a surprise and I appreciate that. I do kind of feel the performance was a bit weird, and just when actors start pretending to stutter and stuff, it feels very put on to me. I think the portrayal got better when that was dropped and you saw the more personal side to him, but yeah, I didn't like it at first. Renslayer also really shone in this episode for me, and I think that she probably had the best arc in it. I'm excited to see what happens next time, and at the moment I feel the series could really go anywhere. Now this is the part of the video where we talk about some trailer shots for next time, so if you don't want to know, then I highly recommend you check out now. Thanks for sticking with us, and I'll see you on the next one. Now in the teaser, we actually get a shot where we can see a little suit model getting pushed along a walkway. At the end of this, we can catch Victor, so I'm guessing that they're going to try and fix the loom. Who knows where this is going to go, but we still have the elevator scene coming at some point. I'm still standing strong that Loki pruned himself, but let me know below if you have any other theories. Anyway, that wraps up the video. I've had fun talking about it, my throat's snacked, but thanks for sitting with me. Now please drop a like, mate, if you've made it at this point, and if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please click the join button. You'll get early access to videos every week, and it goes such a long way to helping us out. If you want to get some heavy spoilers merch, we've got our t-shirt line located just below the video that will let you pick up all kinds of tops like our Loki one, House the Dragon stuff, Theory Time, Ahsoka stuff, and a lot more. We drop new designs in there all the time too, so definitely keep an eye out, and I'd appreciate if you got one. I love you, mate. Now if you want something else to watch, we've got that OB video on screen right now, so definitely head over there right after this. But out of the way, thank you for sitting through the video. I've been Paul, I'll see you next time. You take care, peace.